Hello, so in today's video, we're going to be looking at properties for sale in M21, which is a postcode area of Manchester. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on apartments for sale in this area. And in some future videos, we're going to be looking at semi-detached terraces and detached houses as well. Now, this video is going to require a few ground rules. So, for example, this can work on all locations. It can work on all property types. It doesn't require any prior knowledge. It just gives you some simple methods using Rightmove, Zoopla, on the market, free property portals to help you shortlist potential property opportunities. And it's going to be for you if you're looking for a couple of types of properties. So mainly buy-to-let landlords. You could also use this for other strategies as well. If you're looking for HMOs, for example, which are houses of multiple occupation, serviced accommodation, student lets, works for all of those perfectly. It's also great if you're looking at properties to add value to, or properties that are in great condition. So if you're looking at add value, maybe because of refurbishment, extension, changing the floor layout, or even getting planning permission gain, they're all suitable for this strategy. And at the same time, if you're looking at properties that are in great condition, so you just want properties that you can buy, rent out, no refurbishment required, this strategy will show you how to do that. So it's super simple. We'll go straight into it. And we're going to focus on M21, as I said, which is this postcode in Manchester. So we're going to use Rightmove, Zoopla, and on the market. Currently, we're just looking at Rightmove and trying to get a feel for the size of the total market. So we can see here there's a couple of search criteria. We're going to leave all of these as the default and click find properties. And the main reason for that is because you want to see how many properties are coming up in this area just in total. So we're not going to add apartments or types or anything like that at this range, price ranges, and just see the size of the market. And this is really good if you're looking at multiple locations because you want to get a feel for, is there lots of opportunities in that area or no opportunities in that area. So next up, we'll go to Zoopla. Do the same again, M21, and we'll click on search, or let that search run in the background. And at the same time, go to on the market. So we can see here we've got 118 properties for sale in M21 in Manchester, 79 and 87. So this is Rightmove, Zoopla, and on the market. Rightmove is looking at the largest at the moment, with on the market next, and then Zoopla in terms of the number of properties in those locations. So we're going to be looking at reducing those number of properties down to the specific type. So let's go to apartments, click on done. You can see that's reduced it to 27 already on Rightmove. We're going to keep this area, bedrooms, price range, the same across all of the portals currently. So it's just, remember, apartments that we're focusing on currently in this filters. You can see here there's 22. Don't want to save that. We can see there's 22 on Rightmove, and the same again, M21. We're going to keep all of these the same. And we can see here on the market it's got 9. So currently, again, Rightmove still the largest portal in terms of opportunities. 27 versus 22 is 9. So I'll show you exactly how to do this on Rightmove. It's exactly the same across Zoopla and on the market as well. So next up, we're going to be looking at trying to identify, do we want to set bedrooms, any price ranges, or any other types of filter criteria. Now, ordinarily, we would look to try and reduce this down to a more manageable number if there's loads of opportunities, but there's not lots actually showing up in this postcode for this type of property. I'm going to keep all of these here the same. We would usually, though, show, or don't show, new homes, buying schemes, and retirement homes. We can keep under offer. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but usually it gives us a chance to see some potential properties that might fall through at a later date. So we'll keep them as they are, and then we'll click on done. It's reduced it down slightly here. Filters, we scroll down. So we're going to exclude those. We're going to keep auction. So it's excluding new homes, retirement homes, and shared ownership. So those 3 criteria. Click on update results. And then the same for on the market. This is slightly different layout with each of the portals. So remember to add the right thing. So don't show rather than only show, those 3 criteria. And we're down to 6 properties on the market versus Rightmove at the moment, which is still the highest, 23. Great. So we could change here number of bedrooms. We could change here price range. I would probably say on this occasion to keep it the same. If we were getting lots and lots of results, if we had like 50, 70, 100, 200, depending on the size of the location, I might start then playing around with those numbers of criteria to try and make it a bit more manageable for this search process. But this process shouldn't take long. It should be a 10, 15 minute process for each property type, depending on how many property types you're looking at in a given area. But the other filters that we would look to set, although it's not property types, beds, or price range, can be location. So we can see here a distance radius. On this particular search, we're going to keep it very specific to M21 because I want to show you properties within this specific postcode. But again, you can go a wider radius here if you're looking at a bigger location rather than looking to do multiple searches, you can simply keep the central point M21 and go out as a longer radius from there. The next thing we're going to be doing is looking at the sort criteria. So we've done filters. Next up, sort criteria. We're going to simply put this at lowest price first. What we're looking at here is a couple of different opportunities. So we're looking at properties that could be a great value. We're looking at properties that could be mispriced, standout condition, any standout pictures, anything that really could be a really interesting opportunity over and above the ones next to it. And I'll show you as I go through the different listings what we would typically look for when we're looking at properties for ourselves and for clients. So 23 properties. Let's scroll down here. So available for investment and residential purchase. Great, it's usually a good sign. 110,000. It's already got a tenant in at 550 per calendar month rental income. When it usually comes to these types of descriptions, it specifically calls out landlords, investors, investment purchases, and it's already tenanted. I quite like those listings. The market for them is a bit more limited. So that landlord is going to find it difficult to sell to another investor, to another homeowner or to a homeowner, because if it's already tenanted, they're going to have to give notice. They're going to have some void periods. So selling it with the tenant in makes a lot of sense. Great for the tenant, great for the landlord. But it means that another investor or landlord, they're only going to be the buyers for it. So you can sometimes pick up these properties for a really good price. And they could be great opportunities. They might have a very long-term tenant in, for example. So we're going to save that one. We're going to add it to lists. So in a lot of the portals, you can set lists. We've already got one here for M21. And it's as simple as that. And then it's a case of going through each listing and trying to pick out the ones that are interesting. We'll add those to a shortlist so that later on in the process, we can then narrow it down. If we get 20 or 10, we can narrow that down to a bit more of a manageable list to actually view properties with. So when we're looking at this next couple of ones here, I also like this here. Reduced prices are really good. Doesn't mean they're necessarily a discount, but it's a sign of motivation. It's a sign that the seller and the agent are looking to try and capture a bit more interest on it. So these pictures here, you can see are exactly the same, although price ranges are different. One bed, tenanted until July, 675. On this one's 580. Looks like it might be the same building. Looks like a slightly different property. So this could be a more traditional one bed. This already says here studio apartments. I like that again. Same reason. I'd look to add that to the shortlist. Now, it might be that that property doesn't have the best of yields or isn't in the right condition or location, and we can narrow that down further. But this stage, we're just simply looking at initial criteria. 2-bed, guide price of 140, reduced. So the fact that it's got a reduced symbol on it, the fact that it's a guide price is sometimes interesting. The reason for that is because lots of agents use guide prices as a way to attract interest. So they might put it at a slightly lower price than the market value, a guide of maybe a set price like this one, 140, or they might give a range and say it's 140 to 160 to try and capture people's interest and imagination on that particular property if it's really good value. We understand the property is currently at 850. Great. I'd look to add that. This is also being sold by an auction company by the looks of it. So that particular property, when it goes to auction, could go for a much higher price, might go for a much lower price, might not sell. But auction properties can be quite interesting as well, because a lot of people are scared of them because of the competition. They think they might overpay, but there can be some really interesting deals as well. You just got to be quite careful when you're looking at things like the legal packs, looking at the property itself. Make sure you definitely do viewings. Don't buy unsighted. Next up, this one here, an immaculately presented 1-bedroom property, 150. Reduced again. So there's a couple of reduced properties coming up on the market here. The new listing, even though it says reduced and this says reduced a long time ago, something doesn't sound right there. It's a bit interesting. It looks like it might have been added back to the portal more recently or been tagged as a new listing, even though it might have been on the market for a while ago. Is that a good price? Offers over 150. We need to look at comparison properties to try and get an indication of that. So this is a 1-bed. As we scroll down the list, we'll get a better idea as to the kind of the price ranges between the 1-beds. So at the very top end here, or not top end, top of the list, but the bottom end of the price, you've got 125,000 1-bed. And then as we scroll down, it goes to 150. And I'm sure if we go further, it's going to go even higher. So this particular property here, reduced a long time ago, new listing. I'm going to save it because I'm curious about it and I want to look at the listing in a bit more detail. So we'll go back through the saved properties on a second pass later. Investment and residential opportunity, similar building to the style above here, or same building, should we say. So it looks like there's a few apartments being sold in this particular building, all as individual apartments. Now, if you're a larger investor, there might be a deal here to try and go to the seller and say, look, we'll buy the whole building. That can be a really great way to get a freehold, an unbroken block freehold as well. Quite rare, they're quite difficult to get hold of. Might not be the best price. Usually when you're buying a full building, you get it at a much better price. If you're buying individual apartments, or the landlord or the seller has split them out as individual apartments, they're often doing it because they get a better price for it. So another one here, Brookstone, Baltimore Road. So there's a few in this building. So I'm going to save all of the ones that we come across in this building because I do find that curious. Nothing really standing out here. Pictures look a bit samey. 160, it was reduced a couple of months ago. Could be one to maybe have a look at. I'm going to add it for now. I might take it off again later when we go through the next kind of phase of the shortlisting. And one of the reasons for that is because if we look here, this is 185 one bed. This one's still 160 and it was reduced. So it's a discount-ish compared to properties that are on the market in the same area. Is it the same street? Is it the same condition? Is it the same size? We don't know that yet, but it gives us an indication as to potential scope of price ranges. And everything from here, studio 110, one bed 125, down to one bed 185. So if you're buying a one bed at 125 versus 185 and the rental amount is maybe similar or quite close, your yield's going to be much better on the lower price property. And that's why often you see investors, landlords buying lower price properties, because the cost of the asset really matters in terms of that rental yield. This one doesn't jump out to me, although it was reduced. It's the highest one bed that we've come across, so I'm not going to be saving that on this particular pass. Next up, we're starting to look at two beds. So this is the lowest price two bed that we've come across so far, 190,000. I'm going to save that because it gives us a baseline. Added a month or so ago, so it's still on the market after a couple of weeks worth of marketing. Maybe it's mispriced, maybe it's not the best location. We don't know that yet. It could be a great location, could be a great price. It's just not an active market. We can look through the pictures here to try and have a look at the detail a bit further. Does look like a little bit of work needed, nothing major. Like if it's an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, that's going to be a really simple refurb internally. As long as the main block itself is sound. You've got painting, decorating, maybe some refreshing you can do in the kitchen and bathroom. But I think that's pretty good. I think that's quite an interesting property. You could turn that around quite easily if you were looking to do some kind of works on it. One thing to consider though with some of these apartments, I'm not saying it's the case with this particular one, is that they might have limiting clauses in the lease where you can't rent it out. Not always the case, but sometimes it can be. And even if you're renting out to buy to let tenants, that might be fine, but they might have limiting clauses if you wanted to rent it to short-term stays, like a short tenancy agreement or a holiday let or a short-term stay type of approach, like on an Airbnb or booking.com. Some leases, some properties, especially apartments, can be limiting on that. So if that was your strategy, it's worth looking into that when you're doing viewings and speaking to the agents. Next up, Woodlake Avenue. So we've got here 190 for a 2-bed, and these now are still 2 beds at 190, and then we go back down to a 1 bed at 195. And because of our use cases looking for properties to rent out, to earn a good rental income, maybe to buy, refurbish and sell as well, we want to buy good value. So this one here, it's only added a couple of weeks or so ago, so it's quite recent. Looks like a really nice building, could be quite quirky internally in terms of the room sizes, shapes, layout. Might have a little bit something that's a bit more interesting about it than a traditional apartment block. Looks like a nice garden, probably a communal garden there. So the building itself looks great. My concern would be though that this is a 1-bed flat for 195 compared to some of the other 1-beds which were 20, 30, 50,000 lower. So I'm not going to add that one, but this one I am going to look to add because it's a 2-bed at 190. Looks like a conversion of some kind. This is what stands out to me more of a traditional, like an ex-council semi-detached house, usually 3 bedrooms. Sometimes in some areas they're quite large, and owners previously have split maybe the top part of the building and the bottom part of the building, give them separate entrances, and they've created 2 apartments, and that might be the case in here. So we've got here a fantastic 2 double-bedroom first floor apartment with off-road parking, privately enclosed rear garden. Off-road parking's great. Private gardens are really good, even with apartments as well. People like gardens, and that can be quite unusual to have a private garden, so I like that. So I'd like to add that one. Also reduced. And if we scroll across and have a look at some of the pictures, you've got some potential for improvement. Like kitchenette here, looks like it can be improved. Looks like the garden's a bit tired. You can see here from the pictures. And that usually is an indication as well as to other parts of the building. It's rare that you'd have like a really good refurbishment done on 80% of the property and have one room that's not refurbished. So if you start to see some pictures where the property looks like it needs a bit of work, a bit tired, that's likely the case throughout the rest of the properties. You can kind of bear that in mind when you're looking at it at a desktop level. I like that. I think that's quite an interesting one. It's got a little bit of scope for improvement. It's a lower value 2-bed compared to some of the others, and it's got some features that some others might not have, like the off-road parking and the garden. So hopefully through this approach you can start to see what stands out in terms of the properties. This one here looks like a ready to go, tidy enough block, loads of scope with parking, so that's not a limiting factor, which can be quite frustrating for some city centre apartments. Ready to move into, well presented, 2 double bedroom, relatively straightforward, this one by the looks of it. 210 might end up being kind of in the middle ground, excuse me, of prices. So not too high, not too low. It doesn't jump out as like, oh, this is an amazing opportunity. It can be worth adding. So you've got some baseline comparisons, which will come clearer as we go through this process throughout the different property types and different strategies. So I might add that for now. Likely take it off later. What we're trying to do is get to a short list of safe properties, 10 or more comfortably, 20 ideally, because if we're then going to reduce that down to a manageable short list of properties to view, if you start, and these are just rough examples, but if you start with a market size, let's say there's 100 properties in an area and you can reduce that down to 20 potential opportunities in your short list, that's a really good indicator. So about 20%. If you can then go from 20 down to about 4, maybe 5, so sort of 20, 25% again of those properties that are worth speaking to the agents about and viewing, and you're doing this on a regular basis, ideally a weekly basis, you've got a really nice tempo of property opportunities that could be a good fit. And again, you can do this in any area. So if you're covering multiple locations, you're going to start to get more and more properties added to that list. So Chelsfield, Grove and Baltimore Road, Manchester M21, these types of properties here, 2 beds, which is good. The higher end, nothing kind of really jumping out. This one here could say is worth adding if we've added this one. This one's 215, this one's 210, different agents. This one's only, well, added a couple of months or so ago. This one reduced more recently. And if there's a couple of properties in the same building, you really like that area, it's worth viewing both of them. It's worth offering on both of them if they're both good. And then depending upon the motivation of the seller, you might get a deal on one, you might not get an offer accepted on another. So it's worth doing multiple viewings on those ones. So I'm going to add it because it's same building, same location, but it's not jumping out to me as an amazing opportunity compared to some of the ones that we might come across. We're now starting to get up to kind of higher price ranges for not much more differentiation. So could be an amazing building, could be an amazing location. The apartment itself looks tidy, relatively straightforward. This particular part of the area could be highly sought after, hence the price, but it won't necessarily give the highest rental yield. There's not loads of potential to add value here from the images in the description that we're seeing straight off. So we'd look to kind of move past that one. And that's probably it. We're probably coming up to now to higher price ranges of ones that don't necessarily stand out. A lot of the apartment buildings here look like relatively new builds. You've got some older style houses, quite large Edwardian, Victorian style buildings that are converted into apartments over years. What you could do is, as you start to see the higher price properties, if you've maybe skipped over some of the lower price ones and you're thinking, actually, maybe that 1 bed or that 2 bed were potential value adds. This one here, for example, 195, 1 bed. And if we scroll down, the next similar style for a 1 bed is 240. I'm sure it's a different street and a different location and different level of interest, but that style here compared to this style is going to be a different person that rents it, buys it, and have a different dynamic going forward in terms of potential for growth as well. There's usually a lot more of these style of buildings that have been built and developed over a period of time, and people tend to gravitate towards these older style houses if they've got some sort of unique features to them. They stand out a bit more. So this one here, although the price range not great, you could go back and save it because you think maybe it's a better option compared to some of the other similar styles later on down the list. This one looks a slightly different building. Again, that might jump out later on a secondary search. So we're going to go now from looking at this list view, which is properties in a list order, to a map view. And that'll help us identify some new opportunities. And that's it really. So there's no 3 beds jumping out. This one here, but it's significantly higher than all of the 2 beds by quite a margin. We've got some 2 beds that are under 200,000. This is the 3 bed that goes to 295. You'll get a little bit more rental income from it, but nowhere near enough to justify that extra 100,000. 2 bed for 295 in the same building as this, 3 bed for 295 in the same building as what this one looks like here, 240. So arguably, you might look at that and say, well, if you wanted that building and that area, 240 for a 1 bed or 295 for a 3 bed, the 3 bed would be much more appealing in that respect. Larger, more options for resale in the future, more options for rental, but I think it's too high as a value for this comparisons that we're looking at. Okay, so now we go from the list view through to something called map view. So if we scroll all the way to the top and go to map, what we can see here is a map outline of this particular location. And I'm going to scroll in a bit further. And there's a couple of reasons for doing this map view versus the other approach that we took. So first of all, you can see here the outline of the particular postcode, which is really good. It helps you keep a focus on the properties that you're looking at. Now, if we click on these pins, if there's one property, like here, you'll see one pin, and then you'll see one listing when you click on it next to the map. So we've got this property here, we've got this pin here. Now, if we scroll out a little bit, and this is one we've already kind of saved, what you'll start to see is more pins getting closer together. Now, this particular approach for looking at maps is to try and see outliers of prices. So maybe a property's been put on the market and it's mispriced. Could be too high, could be too low. But when that's next to another property, it gives us a nice indication of potential outlier. So you could have a property that's on the market for 200,000 and then one next to it for 240, and they're very similar. They're in the same location. We know they're kind of nearby, same street maybe even, but there is a big difference in terms of the price range. 200 to 240, it's a 20% discount or 20% difference in terms of price ranges. So this is another way of trying to spot potential outlier properties. Now, some of these we've already got liked here. You can see this kind of heart, but if we scroll in and look at this one here, so 210. Now, if we unfortunately get too close to the pins, it can be hard to click on them. But this one was where we spotted two properties in the same building. So you got a 2-bed flat for a 140 guide price, 2-bed flat for a 210 guide price. So this one here, is going to auction by the looks of it at 140. And now, because we've got these two comparisons saved, it's a really nice way of trying to say, well, for example, if we wanted this particular property and you went to auction and the one for 140 sold at 140 or 150 or 160, that's a way better price than this other one. Same building, same street, same development, just a completely different price range. Now, it might be because it's tenanted and there's a problem with the tenant, and then you've got other things to kind of manage and deal with there. But it's definitely one to shortlist. It's definitely one to speak to the agent on, and it's definitely one to find out more about. Yes, you need to do research, you need to do due diligence, you need to look at legal packs when it goes to auction, but that's a really good way of trying to identify potential opportunities because you've got a really nice like for like comparison on that one. Let's scroll over here, 150. So 252, 295, and 240. These are all 2 beds, and that's a 1 bed at 150. And these 2 beds here, 240. 240 jumps out a little bit. Maybe not enough because you've got one for 252. I'd want to be seeing that ideally around 10% discount when we're looking at these ones that are next to each other in terms of outliers. So if it's on for 250 and we're looking at 10% discount, we're ideally looking at something that's 225. So this one here is 295 and this one here is 240. You could argue that that's a 10% more discount than this one here, but because you've got another option kind of price ranged in between, similar stylish of property, then to me, it's not enough of an outlier to add. So I'd leave that off for now. 240 again here, that's a 1 bed, 300, 295. These are the ones that we kind of saw on the same development. Again, I like the 3 bed versus the 1 bed, but the price range is just, it seems way higher compared to some of the others we've got in the list. 195. And then there's a couple of different options here. So if you click on there, it's got 4 options in the same location. Now we've already identified these in the list version of the search. Studio, 1 bed, 1 bed, 1 bed, significantly different in terms of prices on the 1 bed. Usually when they're in the same building, that's because one of them's got a slightly better position. Maybe it's higher up in the building and it's got a nicer view, or maybe it's a nicer layout, or larger rooms very often is the case. Bigger bathroom, bigger kitchen, bigger reception room, bigger bedroom, and therefore if it's priced on a price per square foot basis, then it's going to be on the market for a higher price, which is why you can see this difference here. And then 245. These aren't really jumping out. 190, that one's a good price compared to these other ones. So 190 versus 258. And this one here is a 2 bed. Different building style, of course, but a much better price range. So if we hadn't already identified this on the list view, I would look to be adding this on the map view and I'd be saving it here. 185. 260. So this 185 here is only a 1 bed, whereas this one's 260 2 bed. Because we've got 190 here as a 2 bed, I don't think I'd be adding that as a 1 bed. 185, 270 is a 2 bed. And if we scroll back out, again, we can come back over here to these properties here. And that's it. That's simply a way of shortlisting. Go back out to the map to scroll a bit further. Properties for sale in M21 postcode district of Manchester, looking at apartments specifically. And you can do this shortlist across Zoopla. You can do this shortlist across On the Market. You can do it across any of the property portals. We've done it specifically here on Rightmove, off with a lot more opportunities in the area. And we go to here, if we look at filters, we've got 23 results in total in that location. We go back to the list view and we can go to my Rightmove and look at save properties for sale in Manchester. We've got 11 properties, so 11 opportunities. Now, some of them we might reduce down and clear off the list, but 11 opportunities from what was sort of 23 opportunities on Rightmove. And then if we go back to, we want to go back to here because I just want to show you something on here. We can then set up different folders for apartments, semi-detached, terrace houses, and then you've got all different types of criteria that you can look at within those properties. Hope that helps. Any questions, any comments, please leave them in the video below. And then next up, we're going to be looking at the same area, but a different property type.